Hello, you. You're listening to A History of Italy. Episode 176, Cesare the Conqueror, 1499 to 1500.
E così ritorno su, lascio I colli nelle valli, tra due salici piangenti, io ritrovo la speranza di un amore che ormai fu.
Before we start, a shout out to a colleague.
I'm Mark Pimenta, the host of the Warlords of History podcast, focused on intriguing warriors and leaders, ancient and medieval, that were titans during their respective ages, where, over several episodes, we'll review each of their lifetimes and actions, but also take this further by exploring the surrounding environmental and political conditions, their motivations for taking on the mantle of war. We'll cover what they did, how they did it, and finally, what their legacy was beyond their demise. If any of this interests you, join me as we dive into each of their lifetimes, their worlds, in the Warlords of History podcast.
Thanks very much for that, Mark, and make sure that you head over to Warlords of History wherever you get your podcast. In the last episode, we finally saw French King Louis XII enter Milan and make good on his ancestral claim to the duchy after Duke Lodovico il Moro legged it out of the city to seek the help of Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian, but also to run away, up in Innsbruck, modern-day Austria. And a lovely place to visit, although you may need to trade in a kidney or put a mortgage on your house if you want to go up in the cable car. We mentioned also that Louis had the opportunity to admire the work of Leonardo da Vinci and was looking to hire him to take to his court in France. But by that time, da Vinci was in the employment of Cesare Borgia, the illegitimate made legitimate son of Pope Alexander VI, Rodrigo Borgia, and he had headed off to Rome. So we decided to take a break from the Italian wars and check in on those nice, friendly Borgias. Now, the situation in Rome was not quite as dangerous as it would become, especially once the grounding influence of Lucrezia Borgia would disappear once she married the Duke of Ferrara and left. Nevertheless, already there were some worrying signs of what was to come. For example, being rich soon started to become an unexpectedly undesirable position to be in. The noble families of the Eternal City found themselves in the odd situation of not wanting to be too rich and famous, and definitely not wanting to show it off. Having a lot of wealth meant that you could appear on the radar of the constantly money-hungry Borgias, suddenly be accused of a crime that you may or may not have committed, and then end up in prison and have all your wealth and lands confiscated, and also, possibly, end up dead. Having said this, let's not get the erroneous picture of the evil Borgias oppressing the poor, virtuous and innocent Roman nobles. It had always been a free-for-all in which any faction or party was quite ready to stoop to tricks, traps and murder. It's just that the Borgias were very good at being worse than many others. Another aspect that foreshadowed dark times was Cesare's different attitude towards being criticized. Pope Alexander VI had always been quite lenient, allowing propaganda pamphlets against him to go uncensored, as well as allowing public criticism. He seemed to be untouchable no matter what he did anyway, so he just let people talk. Cesare was of a whole other point of view. We have already mentioned that he would actually try and sort of entrap people by disguising himself and then starting up conversations in taverns that were critical to the Borgias to see if anyone took the bait. If they did, it could often mean their last conversation. Cesare's iron grip on the politics of Rome was yet to be established. For now, it was time to start carving out his own duchy, or why not even kingdom. That meant setting his sights on the Romagna area to start with. Before we follow Cesare there, let's have a look at where we are going exactly, although I have mentioned what the Romagna area is in passing. you'll find the maps mentioned in the post and the maps on the page of ahistoryofitaly.com site. Now, we know that Italy has 20 regions with certain administrative competences that are specific to each one, such as roads, health care, tourism, and education, although they are not as independent as an American state, for example. Among these is the region of Emilia-Romagna. This is one of the regions, along with Piedmont, Lombardy, Veneto, and Friuli-Venezia Giulia, that are in part covered by the Po Valley. If you look at the relief map of Italy that you find in the post and on the site, you can see that the Po Valley is the only really large section of flat land in an otherwise predominantly mountainous country. That makes the regions in this area, with easier transport and fertile lands, among the richest in the country, part of the issue of the north-south economic divide. Inside the single Emilia-Romagna region, the division between the Emilia and Romagna parts is historical, cultural, and geographical. The Emilia part gets its name from Roman consul Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, who founded many camps and colonies there, such as Reggio Emilia, as well as the Via Emilia road, which goes from Rimini to Piacenza, cutting through a good part of the region. The Romagna part comes from the fact that it was this area that remained in Byzantine possession after the invasion migration of the Lombards, so it was the part that still belonged to the Romans, thus Romagna. The division between the two parts is marked by the Silaro River, which then flows into the Reno and then the sea, thus encompassing the provinces of Rimini, Ravenna, Forlì-Cesena, and a little bit of the province of Bologna, although the city of Bologna itself is considered Emilia. In the time of Cesare Borgia, Bologna was considered part of the papal state by the Pope, but saw itself as independent under the off-and-on rule of the Bentivoglio family. Piacenza and Parma were part of the Duchy of Milan, Reggio Emilia, Modena, and Ferrara were under the Este of Ferrara, and Ravenna was under the influence of Venice, although ruled by the da Polenta family. That meant that also Forlì, Imola, Cesena, Faenza, and Rimini were practically fair game for Cesare, as they were officially part of the papal states. We had seen that the conquest started off with a casus belli, i.e. the Pope telling the lords of the lands of Romagna that they hadn't been paying their dues. In our Caterina Sforza series, we saw that she protested by sending an ambassador and also complaining that she had not received her dues owed to her husband Girolamo Riario from his time in service to the church. Speaking of false or true accusations, it is in this period that she was accused of trying to assassinate the Pope by using poisoned letters. Although it is likely that this was part of the Borgia playbook of false accusations used to imprison lords and take their possessions, having spent some time with Caterina, we know that it was not impossible for her to come up with something like that. Caterina's daughter, Bianca Riario, was by now married to another lord of the area, the young Astore Manfredi of the small county of Faenza, stuck between Imola and Forlì. He would have been another in Cesare Borgia's sight. To round off the group of recipients of these sort of eviction notices were the Malatesta lords of Rimini. Now, Rimini is our go-to place when we want a quick seaside holiday. We prefer Rimini because, as well as the seaside stuff like well-organized beach facilities, pubs, cafes, and restaurants, it is also historically important. It was the Roman city of Ariminium, an important port onto the Adriatic, and in the time of Julius Caesar was near the border with the Republic. To get there from our city in Emilia, we have to literally cross the Rubicon, as in the river, every time we go. Yes, that is the correct use of literally, because I mentioned something that I actually do rather than a figurative version of it. In Rimini, you can find the Bridge of Tiberius, which you can still walk over more than 2,000 years after it was built, as well as the Ark of Augustus, and recently a domus belonging to a surgeon was uncovered and you can visit to see the mosaics, and in the nearby museum, they have recreated his surgery room with the implements from the domus. Then, of course, speaking of crossing the Rubicon, remember all that alea jacta est, i.e. the die is cast business? Well, good old Caesar made that speech in Rimini. You can see his statue more or less on the spot. In an interesting overlap of layers of history that you can find over and over again in Italy, what was known as Julius Caesar Square now bears the name Tre Martiri, 3 martyrs, commemorating 3 brave anti-fascists who were hung in the square for their opposition to the regime. Just around the corner, you can find a museum dedicated to an illustrious son of Rimini, the director Federico Fellini. His museum is housed inside Castel Sismondo, built by the medieval lords of Rimini, and here we come full circle, the Malatesta. Spoiler alert, as we near the end of the reign of the Malatesta over Rimini, they will be getting their own episode soon. At the time of the Borgia's eviction notice, the Malatesta lord of Rimini was Pandolfo IV. He was not a great lord, cruel and vengeful, and always strapped for cash. The nickname he earned in history was Pandolfaccio, the accio suffix in Italian meaning something bad or hard. For example, lavoraccio is a bad or a tough job. So he was Bad Pandolfo. He had been Lord of Rimini since the age of 8 when his father had died in 1482. Incidentally, at that time, another family member of the Pope had tried to get his hands on Rimini. In that occasion, it had been Girolamo Riario, nephew of Sixtus IV, but more importantly, husband of Caterina Sforza. Thanks to the intervention by Venice on the side of the Malatesta, it had come to no avail. Pandolfaccio had a special room that was decorated with beautiful frescoes, but also a secret trapdoor. He would invite people to view the artwork and, at the right moment, activate the trapdoor, and they would disappear, never to be seen again. Once he consulted a fortune teller who told him that he would die far from Rimini. He had the fortune teller executed. He would die far from Rimini. He was, however, a pretty decent military leader and had participated for Venice in the Battle of Fornovo, in which the Italian alliance had seen off French King Charles VIII, and then at the siege of Novara, helping the Sforza get rid of Duke Louis of Orléans, who was now King of France, and supporting Cesare Borgia's escapades in Romagna. By the way, before the word escapade came to mind, I hadn't actually heard it for a while, and immediately afterwards I went and listened to Janet Jackson's 1989 hit Escapade. I had always wondered why the video started out in what was apparently an African country, and then at a certain point she shouts, Minneapolis, which is in Minnesota. Then I discovered that that is where the Rhythm Nation album was recorded. Anyway, you may have gathered, I digress. Pandolfo Malatesta's reaction to the Pope's accusation of him not paying his dues was to go pleading to Rimini's more recent ally, Venice, for help, and that saved the dominion of the Malatesta for a little while, but not much longer than that. As we know, things kicked off with Imola. Imola and Forlì, of course, were under the dominion of our friend Caterina Sforza, but by then, Imola was in no way going to stick their necks out for her. The city opened its gate to Cesare Borgia and the French troops, and would soon live to regret it. The fortress held out, sending word to Caterina and reaching a temporary agreement with Borgia. If word did not come back from the Lady of Forlì within 3 days, the castle would be surrendered. No answer came, and when the deadline passed, the Castellan Dionigi Naldi surrendered the castle, and he and his garrison were allowed to go free. Next was Forlì. After realizing that the citizens of the city could not be trusted, Caterina holed herself and her last defenders up in the fortress of Ravaldino, just south of the city. Cesare Borgia was let in, with Caterina firing the occasional cannon shot onto the houses of the notable members of the city authorities who she felt had betrayed her. It was tradition in Forlì that the new lord should go on horseback around the main square 3 times, and if he was acclaimed by the people, then he was accepted. In perhaps what was a bad omen for how things would play out, the day Cesare Borgia arrived, it was raining, and he only did half a go around the square. Then it was time to face Caterina. The TV series The Borgia, at this point, has Cesare threatening to kill Caterina's son in front of her, and she uttering the famous phrase, "Go ahead then, kill him," then grabbing her lady parts and adding, "I have here the mold that is needed to make more." You, my dear constant listener, of course, know that this did not happen at this point, but in fact 12 years before, when the Orsi had just assassinated her husband and she was once again holed up in Ravaldino. When Cesare Borgia arrived, her children were nowhere near Forlì, but safe in Florence. The siege of Ravaldino took Borgia a lot longer than he would have liked, but in the end, thanks also possibly due to a bad defense or even possibly betrayal by the commander of the castle, Giovanni da Casale, who was also thought to be the latest lover of Caterina, the fortress was taken. During a lull in the fighting, Cesare distracted Caterina from a distance to try and negotiate, and at that moment she was captured from behind. There had been a price on Caterina of 10,000 ducats, which the man who had captured her now wanted to cash in on. He ended up agreeing on 5,000, and Sforza was Borgia's prisoner. The reputation both had for being sensual and insatiable meant that word soon went around that there had been some sort of relationship, but we will never know exactly what. Cesare Borgia was now ready to continue his conquest. There were Faenza, Cesena, and Rimini, and he still had the French forces with him. Then news came from the north that meant that those troops would have to head back to Milan. Ousted Duke Ludovico Sforza had an army, and he wanted his duchy back. Thank you very much for listening. A History of Italy podcast is a Sentire Media production, created and hosted by me, Mike Corradi, and produced by my wonderful, wonderful Patreon supporters, of whom I would like to thank the second part, and that is Ila Valentino, Jacob L., Jeff M., Jeffrey W., John W., Jordan C., Joshua G., Julie G., Justin E., Kyle D., Laura H., Old John in Milwaukee, Go Brewers, Orlando D., Kevin, Linus, Mark P., Marianne D., Marxist-Leninist Sicilian, Mela, and Michus Porcius. Then, of course, we cannot forget the tippy-tippy-top Maria Montessori and Dante Alighieri level, Lisa K., Andrew M., Peter W., David L., David C., J.W., Sen, David A., Karen D., Peter F., Helenka, Kaiserbosch, Brigid Dallas, and Joseph. And a warm and hearty welcome with an Italian kiss on both cheeks to Larry and Igor. Welcome, welcome aboard. If, like them, you'd like to have access to extra content, for example, this month we have a special on my dangerous trip to the beautiful city of Siena, you can go to ahistoryofitaly.com, click through to the support page and become a Patreon supporter. You can also just drop a line to say hello, be critical, please don't be too mean, and or just ask a question. hello@ahistoryofitaly.com or on any of our social media that you find on the contacts page. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Once again, thank you very much for listening, and until next time, arrivederci.